Hi, my name's Millie, and I used to think staying quiet was a form of love. My parents got $2 million to take care of Grandma. They said it was about dignity, family, respect. But behind closed doors, they locked her in a room with no heat, fed her stale crackers, and when she collapsed from hunger, they still smiled in public. At her funeral, they called her cherished, but in her will, she left them $1. And me, she left me the truth. Do you want to know what was on that video they tried to stop? What do you do when the people who raised you are the same ones destroying someone you love? It was one of those frozen evenings in Spokane where the wind feels like it's got opinions. I had just gotten off a long shift, 12 hours, back-to-back home visits, and all I wanted was a hot shower and a little silence. Instead, I was summoned. "Dinner at the house tonight," Mom had texted. No question mark, no explanation. I knew something was up. The dining room table looked like a showroom spread when I walked in. Elowen had even lit the candles, the ones she only uses when she wants to impress someone. Vera, my mother, was already seated at the head of the table, her expression that particular blend of self-satisfaction and tightly wound control. "We have some wonderful news," she said, as soon as I sat down. I hadn't even taken my coat off. She didn't wait for a reaction. "We sold the Oregon property. $2 million, clean deal, and we've decided Grandma will move in with us, full time." I blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" Elowen smiled like a politician. "It just makes sense, Millie. The house is too much for her now, and we can give her a real family environment here." We. That word caught in my throat. There was no we when the property was listed, no we when the decision was made, just a group text to announce a done deal. I swallowed the bitterness. "So no one thought to ask me?" Mom's fork clinked softly against her plate. "You've got enough on your plate, honey. This isn't something we wanted to burden you with." "Right," I said, forcing a tight smile. "Wouldn't want to be a burden." Silas looked down at his drink. He always does that when things get uncomfortable. Cowardice by way of silence. I pushed food around on my plate for the rest of the meal. I don't even remember what it was. All I remember is the feeling, like someone had drawn a family portrait and erased me from it. 1 week later, I showed up unannounced. It was a Thursday afternoon. I had a late start on my home visits and decided to stop by to see Grandma before my shift. I didn't call. I didn't want to give anyone time to tidy up the narrative. The door was unlocked. I walked in. The TV was on low, some local news anchor talking about road closures. I made my way upstairs, quiet as I could, my boots barely touching the carpet. The room they gave her used to be the guest room. I opened the door, and I froze. Grandma Odella was sitting on a bare mattress, no sheets, wrapped in a throw blanket from the living room couch. The window was cracked open, and the cold was biting through. A bowl of dry noodles sat in her lap, the kind you buy for 39 cents. No spoon. She was eating with her fingers. She looked up and smiled, weak, like she was borrowing the energy from somewhere else. "Hi, baby," she said. "Didn't know you were coming." I sat beside her, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just wanted to see you. Are you okay?" She nodded, too fast. "They're good kids, just tired, that's all." That line, that exact sentence, that's the kind of thing women of her generation say when they're hurting and don't want to cause a fuss. I've heard it from patients too many times. "Where's your heater?" "Not plugged in." "Why?" "They said the bills were high." "It's fine." I felt my nails dig into my palms. Just then, Vera walked by in the hallway and poked her head in. "Oh, you're here. I thought I heard footsteps." Her eyes scanned the scene and settled on the noodles. She chuckled. "Mother likes it simple." You know how she is. Simple. My grandmother used to make beef bourguignon from scratch. She canned peaches in the summer. She embroidered tablecloths for holidays. But now she likes it simple. I smiled because I knew if I didn't, I'd scream. Right, I said. Simple. Vera disappeared down the hallway. I heard her phone ringing downstairs, and her voice answer sweetly, "Yes, of course. We're so honored to be helping her." I turned back to Grandma. Her hand had started to tremble a little. I gently took the bowl from her and set it on the nightstand. "You cold?" I asked. She nodded. I wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders and tucked it under her chin, just like she used to do for me when I had strep throat at 9 years old. She leaned her head onto my shoulder. "I'm lucky," she said softly. "Some people don't have anyone." I wanted to tell her that luck shouldn't feel like this, that love shouldn't look like this, but I stayed quiet. On the drive home, the roads were slick with half-melted snow. I didn't turn on the radio, I didn't answer my phone, I didn't cry, but something settled into my bones that night, something I couldn't name yet. A fracture, maybe, the kind that doesn't show up on x-rays, but you know it's there because it hurts when you breathe. And in that quiet moment, something inside me cracked. Quietly, but permanently. The next morning, I stood in my tiny kitchen, cupping a lukewarm mug of tea between my hands, trying to warm up from the inside out. Outside, Spokane was covered in a light frost that hadn't quite turned into snow. I stared out the window at the empty street below, remembering the way Grandma had looked the day before. Thin, almost translucent, wrapped in that ratty blanket like it was armor. I kept replaying her voice, soft and brittle, calling them good kids. I'd heard that same line come out of too many mouths in hospital rooms, people making excuses for the ones who should have done better. I don't know why this felt different. Maybe because it was my family. Maybe because I knew how they operated, sweet to strangers, cutting behind closed doors. Still, part of me hesitated. I knew the pattern. Speak up, and you're the problem. Stay quiet, and you become part of the problem. Either way, you lose. By the time I arrived at their house that weekend, I had convinced myself to stay calm, just observe. I wasn't looking for a fight. I just wanted to see her again. But the minute I stepped through the front door, I knew something was wrong. Grandma was sitting on the edge of the couch in the den, her sleeves rolled up from what looked like a sponge bath. I saw the faint purpling near her elbow, half-faded bruises that didn't belong on an 83-year-old woman. They were shaped like fingers. I crouched beside her. "Grandma, what happened to your arm?" She blinked at me slowly. "Oh, I must have bumped into something." Her voice cracked on the last word. Before I could say anything else, Vera's voice rang out from the kitchen. "Millie, can you help me with the garbage bags?" I stood and walked in, my pulse rising. She didn't look up from the trash can. "Before you ask, yes, she's fine. We all have our clumsy moments, especially at that age." "She has a bruise shaped like a handprint." Vera turned to face me, her smile cool and tight. "You're seeing what you want to see. We're doing everything we can, okay? Don't make this harder than it has to be." Before I could answer, Elowen walked in with her usual air of polished calm, sipping from a double-walled tumbler. "Millie, this isn't the time to be stirring things up. We're all doing our best. Please don't make this about you." That line stung more than it should have. I'd spent my life being told that. Don't make it about you, don't rock the boat, don't speak unless it's wrapped in sweetness. I nodded slowly, knowing anything I said next would just add fuel. I left early. That night, the group text thread lit up. Silas, "Let's all try to keep things respectful." Elowen, "I don't appreciate being accused of things in our own home." Vera, "Millie, Please come to us directly next time instead of creating drama. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Later that week, I dropped off a package for Grandma: nutrition drinks, some supplements, socks with grips on the bottom. I didn't want to walk inside again. I just left it at the porch with a sticky note. Love you. Stay warm. A few days passed. Then came the knock. I opened my door to see Elowen standing there, looking smug in her winter coat. She handed me an envelope. It's from Grandma, she said flatly. I took it, already suspicious. Inside was a folded piece of lined paper, the kind you'd rip from a notepad by the phone. The writing was shaky, uneven. Please don't send these things anymore. I have everything I need. Thank you, Grandma O. The O was off. The curve was unnatural. The loop closed too early. I walked to my bookshelf, pulled out a card from 3 years ago, Grandma's last birthday note to me. Flowing cursive, clean strokes, a signature that felt like her. This one was different, not the same, not even close. I sat down on the couch, the fake note in one hand, the real card in the other. I held them up side by side. The paper crinkled slightly between my fingers. They were rewriting her. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, hands trembling, realizing that what I feared was already happening. They weren't just ignoring me anymore. They were trying to make Grandma disappear too. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan as it spun slowly, whispering the same sentence over and over in my mind. They're erasing her. By the time the first light cracked through the blinds, I had a plan. I got out of bed, threw on a sweatshirt, and drove to my clinic to pick up the spare voice recorder I used during training sessions. It wasn't top of the line, but it could pick up sound from across a room. That would be enough for now. The next stop was the tech store near the old highway. I told the teenager at the counter I needed a discreet motion camera. Something for documenting patient interaction, I lied, sliding my card across the counter. He handed me a small device that looked like a fake potted plant. Nobody will ever notice, he promised. I nodded, thinking to myself, they better not. I didn't tell anyone, not friends, not coworkers, not even the neighbor who always asked how my grandmother was doing. This wasn't a conversation anymore. It was evidence gathering. That Saturday, I went to see Grandma under the pretense of bringing her cookies. Oatmeal raisin, her favorite, not that anyone else in the house would care. Vera was busy scrubbing the kitchen counter with too much force when I walked in. Elowen gave me her trademark tight smile and vanished upstairs. It was like walking onto a stage where everyone already knew their lines but refused to give me the script. Mother's resting, Vera said flatly, wiping her hands on a towel. You can leave those in the kitchen. I ignored her and walked down the hall to Grandma's room. Odella was awake but sluggish, her hands trembling as she tried to fold a frayed dish towel. I hugged her gently, setting the cookies down. While she was distracted, I stepped into the small bathroom attached to her room and carefully slipped the recorder behind her nightstand, tucked between the baseboard and the lamp cord. It was the only place out of Vera's obsessive reach. I'll be back soon, I told Grandma before leaving. She nodded, then whispered, Be careful, baby. I wasn't sure if she meant with traffic or with them. That night, I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor with the recorder hooked into my laptop. I listened. There was the sound of soft movement, the rustling of sheets, then footsteps, heavy ones. Vera's voice, cutting through the silence like a slap across the face. You don't need more food. You eat like a pig. Silence. Then Grandma's voice, barely audible. I'm sorry. A door slammed. I hit pause. My fingers hovered over the laptop keys, unsure whether to cry or scream. Instead, I closed the file, took a breath, and started planning the next step. On Monday, I brought the fake potted plant with me. The camera was already charged, memory card installed. I placed it on the corner shelf beside the window, angled just right to capture the bed, the door, and most importantly, anyone who came and went. I stayed for half an hour that day, brushing Grandma's hair and massaging lotion into her hands. She barely spoke, but she smiled when I read her favorite Bible passage. I kissed her forehead before leaving. 2 days later, I watched the footage. Vera entered the room at 7:43 p.m., still in her blouse and slacks from work. She walked straight to the tray on the bedside table. The food, untouched, was scooped up with one hand and dumped into a trash bag. Then she turned to Grandma. "You want to eat?" "Say thank you first." Odella murmured something I couldn't understand. Her head dipped forward, her body slouched. Vera stared for another beat, then walked out and locked the door. I pressed pause, then rewind. "Say thank you first." I played that moment back 4 times. The 4th time, I didn't even look at the screen. I closed my eyes and listened. I could hear the smugness, the control in her tone. I could feel Grandma's shame through the silence that followed. I sat still for a long time. When I finally opened my eyes, the sun had dipped low behind the houses outside, casting a dusty orange across my apartment walls. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt something else. Focused, cold, ready. They thought they could control everything, what Grandma ate, what she said, even the story of her life. But they forgot one thing. They couldn't control what I saw, or what I was about to do with it. I didn't need an alarm clock that morning. The hospital call came just before sunrise, when the world was still cold and quiet. The nurse's voice was too calm, which made it worse. "Ms. Clay, your grandmother's here in the ER. She was brought in early this morning after a fall. It appears she collapsed in the hallway of the house." I sat up in bed, my breath caught halfway. "Is she okay?" "She's stable now, but her blood work shows signs of malnutrition and dehydration. There's also mild hypothermia." I didn't ask how long it had been since she'd eaten. I already knew. Less than 20 minutes later, I was at Sacred Heart Medical Center, coat barely buttoned, hair damp from the rushed shower. Grandma looked even smaller in that hospital bed, her skin too pale under the fluorescent lights. A thin blanket was draped across her knees, and she kept rubbing her fingers together like she was trying to warm herself from the inside. "She hasn't had a real meal in days, maybe weeks," the nurse said, handing me the intake paperwork. "I'm sorry, but we're required to report any signs of neglect to Adult Protective Services if the situation doesn't improve." I thanked her quietly, though the words lodged somewhere between guilt and fury. When I left the hospital 2 hours later, I didn't go home. I drove straight to my mother's house. The snow was picking up, soft and unrelenting, covering the sidewalks in a clean sheet that didn't match how dirty everything felt inside me. I parked in the driveway and didn't bother knocking. I walked in, holding the folder with Grandma's hospital report like it was a weapon. Vera was at the kitchen table, sipping her usual herbal tea like it was just another quiet morning. Elowen was scrolling through her phone, legs crossed at the ankle, face unreadable. I tossed the folder onto the table. The thud echoed. "She's in the hospital, malnourished, hypothermic." "They almost called APS. This is elder abuse." Vera blinked once. "That's a strong accusation." "No," I said, voice firm. "It's a fact." Elowen didn't even look up. "You've always been dramatic, Millie. You know that. You turn everything into a scene." I leaned in, jaw tight. "If one more thing happens to her, I will go public. I will file a report. This is your last warning." Vera stood slowly, setting her mug down with careful precision. "You wouldn't dare shame your own family in public." "Try me." Silas stepped in from the hallway, hands raised like a referee. Hey, let's not escalate this. Everyone's under pressure. I turned to him, tired of his neutrality. You've had every chance to speak up, but you won't, will you? You're too afraid of looking bad. He said nothing, just lowered his eyes again. I walked out without another word. That evening, I checked the family group chat out of habit. It wasn't there. I searched again. Still nothing. I'd been removed. No text, no explanation, just gone. Later that night, Elowen posted on Facebook a soft filtered selfie of her and Vera smiling over tea. Caption: Some people are only happy when they're causing drama. The rest of us keep showing up with love. The comments were full of heart emojis and "you two are the best" replies from their church friends. It took everything in me not to type what I really felt. Instead, I opened the folder on my laptop labeled Evidence, Mom. I stared at the screen until my fingers stopped shaking. I typed a response, a long one, raw and honest. I hovered over the post button, then deleted it. Posting wasn't the point. Action was. I sat in the car outside my apartment, the heater humming low, fog creeping along the windows. Snowflakes had started falling again, sticking to the windshield in quiet defiance. I whispered into the silence, just to hear it aloud. Next time, I won't just knock. I'll break the door. As I pulled away from my mother's house that afternoon, my hands didn't shake. Not the way they had the night I first played back the recording, or when I found the bruises, or even when the hospital called. This time, I was steady, controlled in a way that felt foreign but necessary. The envelope I'd left on her table held a printed list of timestamps, a copy of the medical report, and 2 still frames from the video footage. I didn't include the video itself yet. I wanted to give her the illusion of choice, one last time. It was mid-March now. The snow had mostly melted, but the chill still clung to the mornings. That evening, I returned to my apartment, peeled off my coat, and tossed it on the armchair. Just as I reached for the kettle, I noticed the corner of a pale envelope sticking out of my mailbox slot. I frowned. I hadn't heard the mail come in. I opened the door and pulled it out. No stamp, no return address, just my name written in uneven ballpoint ink. I opened it slowly, standing there by the door, half expecting it to be another veiled warning from Elowen or a guilt-ridden ramble from Silas. Instead, it was one short note, written in block letters on lined paper. I saw her digging in the trash outside your mother's house. More than once. Please help her. A neighbor. I stared at the words, rereading them until they blurred. The tea never got made. Instead, I walked barefoot out into the driveway. The concrete was cold beneath my feet, but I barely felt it. I looked up at the clouded sky, at the way the wind moved the last bits of dead leaves across the sidewalk. My fists clenched by my sides. If they thought silence would protect them, they didn't know me at all. The next afternoon, I returned to their house, unannounced, like always. This time, I didn't bother with politeness. Vera opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, this is unexpected. I held up the letter. Someone saw her, in your trash, looking for food. Elowen appeared behind her, arms crossed like a bouncer at a nightclub. That could have been anyone, she said without missing a beat. I stepped inside without being invited. The letter was addressed to me. It didn't say some woman. It said, your grandmother. Vera let out a small, dismissive laugh. Millie, you can't go around believing every anonymous scrap of paper. I held the note tighter. You mean like the one you forged from Grandma? Elowen's smile disappeared. I know it wasn't her handwriting, I continued. You didn't even try to match it. She scoffed, stepping forward. You're seriously accusing me, again, based on some scribbles from a mailbox? You've been lying so long you don't even recognize truth when it's looking you in the face, I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Vera raised a hand, the same way she used to when we were kids, and she'd had enough backtalk. That's enough. I didn't flinch. You want me to stop? Then stop giving me reasons. There was a beat of silence. Then I walked over to the dining table and placed another envelope on the polished wood. This has everything, I said. Not just the hospital files, not just the bruises, audio, video, timestamps. If you want to handle this privately, I suggest you do it now, because if you don't— Vera didn't move. Elowen hissed, You think anyone will believe you over us? I looked her dead in the eye. I don't need them to believe me, I just need to show them. The air in the room was heavier than the gray sky outside. I didn't wait for more insults. I turned around and walked out, letting the door swing shut behind me. Back in my car, I sat in silence for a while. No music, no phone, just me and the soft tick of the cooling engine. I stared at the house through the windshield, at the curtains that shifted just slightly. Then I drove away. I didn't need them to understand anymore. I needed them to know they weren't invisible. The air that evening smelled like old newspapers and cheap perfume, the kind that clings to your skin long after you've left the room. I stood in front of my laptop, staring at the folder marked Mom Lies, then at the crumpled invitation that had arrived just days earlier. It wasn't addressed to me, of course. It had Elowen's name front and center, announcing her acceptance speech for the Family Caregivers Award, with Vera honored as matriarchal example of community devotion. I found out through a tagged post on social media, the kind with golden filters, staged smiles, and captions like, proud to carry on a legacy of love. Legacy. That word made me want to scream. I hadn't planned on going. I had told myself to stay above it, to let them enjoy their facade. But when I saw the photo of Vera on stage holding that bouquet, standing under a banner that read, Odella Langford, loved and cared for until her last breath, something snapped. I couldn't let them rewrite her life in public. The event was held in the community center down on 9th Street, the one next to the Lutheran church. The parking lot was already full when I arrived. I parked along the curb, double-checked the flash drive in my coat pocket, and walked inside. The place smelled of catered lasagna and lemon cleaner. I stayed near the back, behind a row of folding chairs, invisible among the polite applause and murmured greetings. Vera was at the podium, pearls and pride, smiling like she'd won something real. We believe that caring for the elderly isn't just a responsibility, she said, voice soft and syrupy. It's a privilege. My mother taught us all how to love. We were lucky to return that love every single day. Elowen sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Some folks nodded, some even clapped louder. I stood still, fists clenched. After the speeches, people drifted toward the refreshment table, and I waited until the buzz faded. Vera stepped into the hallway alone, adjusting her shawl, likely waiting for another round of handshakes. I walked up behind her. You know she died hungry, right? She turned, startled but not surprised. Millie, you shouldn't be here. I didn't raise my voice. You don't get to polish her name while the truth rots in a locked bedroom. She exhaled through her nose. I'm tired of your attacks. This was a celebration. Why must you always twist everything into an insult? You can't stage applause loud enough to erase the bruises. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. Whatever you think you have, it'll be dismissed. You're unstable, emotional. Your history of overreacting speaks for itself. I leaned in, barely a whisper. I'm not the one who burned her journal. She blinked, just once. That was enough. I left the building without waiting for another word. Outside, the wind had picked up. I pulled my coat tighter around me and started toward my car. That's when an older janitor waved me down from the side of the building. "Ma'am," he said, pointing toward the dumpster area, "someone left this box back here. Said it was trash, but it looked personal. I thought you might want to take a look." He handed me a shallow cardboard box, water-stained and sagging, written in fading Sharpie across the side. "Odella, bedroom." Inside were pieces of a life someone had tried to bury. A cracked frame with our last family photo, my face scratched out with a pen. Her floral journal, the edges scorched, pages torn. A scarf she used to wear on Sundays, now balled up like a rag. I carried the box home like it was a body. Once inside, I placed it gently on my dining table. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. Instead, I powered on my laptop and dragged the folder from my external drive onto the desktop. Mom lies blinked once, then settled. This time, they wanted attention. I was going to give it to them. By the time the service began, the air inside the funeral home felt heavier than the dark suits and polite silence could carry. The smell of lilies sat too thick in the room, and every pew was filled with people who had never once asked where my grandmother had disappeared to over the past 6 months. I arrived late on purpose. Vera and Elowin were already seated in the front row, surrounded by their curated circle of church friends and civic committee acquaintances, the same crowd that had applauded them at the caregiving awards ceremony. Their pearls gleamed, their shoulders squared. They looked every bit the image of mourning dignity. No one turned when I slipped into the back. No one acknowledged me. I wasn't even listed in the program. Just Vera Langford as the daughter, and Elowin Langford delivering the tribute. No mention of me, no mention of the hours I sat at Grandma's bedside, or the bruises, or the broken heat, or the empty fridge. But I had the USB drive in my coat pocket. Vera stepped up first. Her voice didn't shake. She spoke in that carefully paced, overly sweet cadence she always used for public speaking. My mother was a strong woman. She raised us with love and grace. In her final years, it was our privilege to return that love, to care for her with the tenderness she once showed us. She clasped her hands and bowed her head like she had just delivered a sermon. Elowin followed, her tone hushed and reverent. Grandma Odella passed peacefully, knowing she was adored. She spent her final days surrounded by family, safe, cherished. Lies. I could feel the muscles in my jaw tightening as I reached into my coat and wrapped my fingers around the flash drive. I waited until the officiant thanked the speakers and gave the usual closing about eternal rest and carrying forward her light. Then I stood. I didn't say a word. I just walked calmly toward the small table at the side of the chapel where the AV equipment sat. A technician in a black vest looked at me, startled. He started to say something, but I met his eyes and shook my head once, firmly. He hesitated, then stepped back. I plugged in the drive. The room went quiet, and then her voice filled the air. It wasn't shaky. It wasn't confused. It was Grandma, clear and direct, speaking into my phone the night before she died. I had played it so many times since then, I could recite it from memory. To those who cared more about being seen than seeing me, to the ones who kept the house warm for guests but cold for me, to the family who smiled in public and whispered shame behind closed doors, I leave you exactly what you gave me, $1. A gasp rippled through the room. As somewhere near the front, someone whispered, "Did she just say?" Another voice, unsure, "She was starving?" Vera stood up, face pale. "Turn it off." She made a move toward the AV table, but I stepped in front of her. "I didn't touch her. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there. She stopped. Elowen's eyes darted around the room, looking for allies, but the murmurs were getting louder. Someone in the third row started crying. Not one of ours, just a woman who worked with Grandma years ago who hadn't known the truth until now. I let the message finish. Then I unplugged the drive and walked out. No fanfare, no dramatic turn, just me, stepping back into the overcast afternoon while behind me the room unraveled. People were rising from their seats. Some were confronting Vera. Others just shook their heads and walked toward the doors, hushed and disturbed. I didn't need to stay and watch the fallout. It wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. They tried to erase the truth. I carved it into silence instead. The week after the funeral passed in a blur of gray skies and unopened mail. I ignored the texts, the sideways glances in the grocery store, even the woman from church who stopped me in the parking lot to whisper, "You were so brave." Brave? No. I was just done being quiet. I was folding laundry one morning, Grandma's old flannel tucked between towels I still hadn't brought myself to wash, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. "Miss Clay?" The voice was formal, rehearsed. "This is Daniel Levinson from Red Oak Legal. We're ready to proceed with the reading of Odella Clay's will. You've been named as a participant." I thanked him and wrote down the address, even though I knew exactly where the office was. It shared a building with the podiatrist I took Grandma to years ago, back when she still laughed easily and wore lipstick to the doctor. That Thursday, I walked into the room with no expectations. I assumed the funeral had been the crescendo, that the silence I carved into that chapel had said everything there was to say. Vera, Elowen, and Silas were already seated around the glossy conference table. No one looked at me. Elowen scrolled through her phone. Vera's nails tapped a rhythm against her handbag. Silas looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Mr. Levinson cleared his throat and began. "To my daughter, Vera Langford," he read, "I leave $1. Vera froze. "To my granddaughter, Elowen Langford, I leave $1. Elowen's head snapped up. "To my grandson, Silas Drew, I leave $1. Silas dropped his pen. Mr. Levinson glanced at them, then turned to me. "And to Millie Clay, I leave the remainder of my estate, including all financial holdings, property, and remaining assets." I didn't move, didn't breathe. He continued. "On one condition." Of course there was a condition. Grandma never did anything halfway. Millie must use the inheritance to create something lasting, something that gives a voice to those who were silenced. I blinked. A full minute passed before Vera found her voice. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "She wasn't well when she wrote this. She must have been manipulated." Elowen stood up. "This isn't legal. She didn't know what she was doing." Mr. Levinson reached into his folder, calm and unbothered, and pressed play on a small recorder. Grandma's voice filled the room, steady, present. "Millie," she said, "you saw me. You heard me. You didn't walk away when they did. Use this, not to punish, but to protect others like me. Let them know they're not alone." For the first time since I walked in, I looked directly at Vera. She wasn't blinking. Her face was red, and for once, she had nothing to say. I signed the papers. The following Tuesday, I walked into a modest office space in downtown Spokane. The rent was low, the furniture secondhand, but it was enough. I filed paperwork with the state to establish the Odella Fund, an organization dedicated to elder abuse survivors, their families, and the workers who speak up when no one else will. That night, I sat in front of my laptop, the logo barely designed, the mission statement still a draft, and thought, this isn't about vengeance, it's about visibility. They left her cold, they left her hungry, they left her to be forgotten, and yet somehow her voice made it to the end, clearer than theirs. I didn't win. I carried her voice where it deserved to be, and now it's louder than theirs will ever be. 6 months passed like a quiet exhale. Autumn crept into Spokane gently that year. Soft amber trees, breeze-ruffled grass, and sky streaked with gold in the late afternoons. I hadn't expected peace, not really. But what I found was something steadier, more grounded, a kind of stillness that finally let me breathe again. The front doors of Odella Haven opened that morning with no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no camera crew, just people. People who had been waiting for a space like this without even knowing it. Women with silver braids and gentle eyes. Men who carried their pain in silence. Nurses who'd seen too much and whispered thank you as they stepped inside. There wasn't much to show off, no marble floors or sleek reception desks, but the halls were warm. The staff was trained not just in care, but in listening. Each room had a view of the small garden that stretched along the back wall. 4 benches, each engraved with a name of someone who, like Grandma, had slipped through the cracks. On the side wall near the entrance, a brass plaque was mounted. It read, simply, "For the silenced, may you always be heard." I ran my fingers across it as I passed. Down the hall, I stopped to check the list of residents on the new intake board. We were full. In less than 3 weeks, the rooms had filled with people who had stories, losses, wounds. Many came with nothing but the clothes on their backs and an intake form. A few had no visitors, no family, and still they were home. Later that afternoon, I helped sort through donations in the community room, a collection of coats, blankets, framed art someone had gifted to decorate the walls. One of the aides, Clarissa, walked up with a white envelope in her hand. "This got mixed in with the personal effects box from last week," she said. "It had your name on it." I took it from her, puzzled. The handwriting was unmistakable. Odella. I sat in the small lounge by the window, the sun casting long shadows across the rug, and opened the envelope with care. Inside was a short note written in her careful script. "If this finds you too late, forgive me. You were always my lighthouse. I know you couldn't fix everything, but you saw, you stayed. Never let the fog take you. Keep your light. It's more powerful than you know." I folded the letter and slipped it into the inside pocket of my cardigan, close to my heart. Later that week, a local school brought a group of kids in to visit the residents, part of some community project. I watched from the office window as they helped in the garden, read books aloud, and handed out cookies that crumbled too fast in wrinkled hands. A little girl, maybe 8 or 9, wandered off and walked toward me. Her eyes were big, full of questions she wasn't afraid to ask. "Are you the one who stayed with your grandma when nobody else did?" she asked. I knelt down to her level. "Yes, I was." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I want to be like you." I smiled, but my throat tightened. "Be better than me," I whispered. She grinned and ran back toward the others. In the months since the will, I hadn't heard from Vera or Elowen. Not a word. Silas sent a check once. No note, no return address. It sat in a drawer, uncashed. Every now and then, I'd see Elowen's name float across social media, posts about starting fresh, learning boundaries, reclaiming peace. All that polished language people use when they've buried the truth so deep they almost forget the shape of it. I never commented. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt, but standing under the trees outside Odella Haven, I knew I didn't need them anymore. I had names etched into benches. I had stories being shared over shared meals. I had a hallway filled with warmth and rooms filled with dignity. I lost a family, but I found a purpose, And sometimes that's the kind of justice that actually lasts. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones who fail us the most. But silence doesn't have to be the end of the story. Millie's journey shows us that speaking up, no matter how hard, is what gives dignity back to those who were denied it. Have you ever been the only one who stood up in your family when no one else would? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to hear more powerful family stories just like this. You never know, one of them might be your own.